Welcome to the Twice Over Movies podcast. If you're new here, check out our website at thetwiceover.com to get a better understanding of how we do our movie reviews. Our goal is to provide insight on elements of a movie which you consider more or less important, so that our scores are never misleading. Remember to follow us at the Twice Over on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and support us on Patreon.
So let's just call this a spoiler alert. Anything we say now will discuss the entire story. There are a couple spoilers in this movie, so if you haven't seen it, I think it is worth watching. At least in my opinion, it's worth watching because I love the writing and I like writing a lot in movies. Even with Faaraan, I think most of your scores, I mean, nothing is too extreme, but like your score, even with your order, averages out to an 82.
Yeah, and that's really accurate for what I thought of the movie. I think that you have to sort of have to watch it twice in order to get the full breadth of the movie. To see everything that is great in the movie, you have to watch it twice, I believe.
Did you watch it twice for this?
I did.
Okay, yeah. I first saw it like maybe 2 years ago, and I watched it obviously a second time before we're recording right now. I did appreciate it a little more on my second watch, so.
I always watch movies at least twice, the ones that I like. And I'm trying to really see the art in it. You can't do it just by watching it once, in my opinion. I think you have to see it knowing what happens so you can focus on other things, and you can focus on foreshadowing and you can focus on other things, which we could talk about foreshadowing. What did you think about that first scene?
Remind me what the first scene is.
So the very first scene is one that I thought you would be coming up, talk about that right out of the gate. It's during the credits. So while the credits are rolling, the camera is very, very slowly inching towards the view of the church. This is one of 3 moments in the movie where there is a moving camera. And it's shot from below. They had to get kind of
looking up
at the church, and the church is daunting. It's sort of dark outside. It's like very cloudy, dead trees everywhere. And the church is, the way that they portrayed the church was very, it's daunting. It's kind of, sort of depressing in a bit.
Like an overbearing presence.
Overbearing presence. It's sort of overwhelming. And where they chose to shoot it from the bottom. So you're looking at it from you're seeing it in its full, I guess in its full form, is very daunting. And I think that's kind of foreshadowing of the whole movie, right? It's depressing. The church is not, and in the movie the way that they make it is that the church is not an optimistic place. It's sort of depressing, for this character at least.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's almost like the church has taken on the personality of the character of Reverend Tyler, right?
Right.
I mean, it's an old church. It's like on its last legs. It's only like open as people call it, like a souvenir shop. People come in and like tour it because it's like 250 years old. The actual church where all the action is, where all the worshipers go, is like this big mega church that's like in the city that actually owns this smaller church. And, and we should say that the name of the church is First Reformed, which is also the title of the movie.
I'm not well versed on Christianity and different, the different, I guess, movements within Christianity, the different sects within Christianity. But I think that this is I would imagine that this is an allusion to one of the, I don't know if this is one or not, but I would imagine it's an allusion to one that is actually a sect in Christianity. Do you know about that at all or no?
Not really, man. I actually thought about that myself. Like, okay, you have a lot of characters with biblical names, and I'm sure like it's symbolizing stuff, but maybe it's going over my head, being that I'm not well versed in Christianity.
Yeah, we're both Muslims, so a lot of this movie is going way over our head, probably.
Well, I will say, okay, we have the shots of the church in the beginning. I do remember that, but then you're hearing him giving his sermon, right? That's what we actually hear, and then we see him in the church. Or is it him, like, I forget what comes first, him writing in his journal and like telling us that the journal comes first and then his sermon comes the next day, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so we're like push right into like his thoughts right away. And that makes sense, I guess, with the shots that you mentioned in the beginning, with they're showing the church in like this daunting manner, and then we get into Tyler's head right away, and he's clearly a little down. He's disturbed, probably depressed. We kind of find out later that he's a bit of an alcoholic, is drinking a little too much, and he's keeping this journal to, I guess, for his own sanity, but he also says that he wants to burn the journal after a year. Like it's like an exercise that he's just doing for a year. What did you think of that? What did that mean that he wanted to burn it after a year?
Yeah, I think that he is a character who, I don't think the confidence is there. He doesn't have the confidence that an Ethan Hawke character usually has. He's he's very reserved, kind of, and he's just not very sure of himself. And when it comes to journals and stuff like that, when people who aren't happy with themselves, really, they don't think that what they're writing is really worth anybody reading, anybody listening to,
Yeah.
themselves even. They just don't think that there's any worth in their writing because they don't think there's any worth in themselves. So that's sort of what I got out of that. Is because, and he didn't decide that right away. Well, sorry, he decided that after a year he was going to kind of just burn it. But in
Yeah.
the first journal scene, we don't get into his depression at all. In the next time he does write in his journal, and he's narrating it really. That's when he says, I read over the first few pages I wrote, and I read them in disdain. I can't believe I wrote
Yeah.
that stuff, right? And that's after one
Mhm.
session.
Yeah.
So, and that's building his character. It's an interesting way to build somebody's character, is through them narrating their journal.
It was a journal, like that narration, that I really enjoyed a lot when it came to the writing. That's why like my writing score is so high. I mean, I'll move on to like the next part that I think is probably the only scene where I don't know if I should say it's like like that it's not slow feeling. Like it's something is happening and you're probably as an audience member very engaged. It's when he goes to Mary and Michael's house to talk to Michael for the first time about Mary's pregnancy, and Michael's obviously this pretty he's a very he's depressed, right? He's definitely dealing with depression, and he doesn't want Mary to keep the baby because he thinks it's unfair to bring a baby into the world where with climate change happening at the pace that it is happening. And I thought that conversation was probably my most engaged scene, and just the most. I thought the writing was great again because they're talking about some heavy and big things here, but it just flows so well. It's something that everyone can, I guess, relate to in some way.
I don't know what exactly it is. I don't know if Ethan Hawke chooses roles based on what his dialogue is going to be, or if he just executes these things so damn well. He and I also don't know how much of his dialogue is improvised, but you know how we were talking about dialogue being very natural in other movies. That's the case here. And so when he does execute
Yeah.
dialogue, he's not reading from a script, or at least it doesn't seem that way. He is he's does such a good job of putting in natural intonations in places, natural pauses, inserting the word in dialogue. So I think that's part of the reason why that conversation that he has with Michael is so engaging outside of their
Hmm.
subject matter. You mentioned Michael. I thought he did an amazing job, and here's why. Because the way that they shot that scene, most of the dialogue is shot right in front of the person speaking, right in front of
Yeah.
the speaker. So there's no hiding, from you have to make a great performance in order to execute, and that's in terms of everything. The camera, one side of her face is not hidden, or whatever. It's right in front of you, and it can be probably pretty nerve-wracking to perform in that kind of a situation. And I thought he did a really good job. If you watch his lips while he's speaking, there's it's obvious that he's very passionate about the subject, and he's depressed,
Passion and
concerned, on
and
the verge of
yeah,
crying the whole time, on the
yeah,
verge of
yeah, yeah.
tears, and his lip quivers as he's speaking. He, yeah, I just think he delivered. He delivered really well. Honestly, his performance in that one scene was my second favorite in the movie. Um, uh,
Second favorite. Okay, what was your first?
oh, Ethan Hawke, the whole thing, everything.
Oh, as far as performance, I thought in terms of scene, what was your
Let's see,
favorite scene?
favorite scene. It might be when he's yelling at that one chick.
Esther?
Yeah, it might be that one.
Yeah, I have that written down
Because
too as one of the scenes.
I've
Like,
never seen Ethan Hawke like that.
yeah, he's pretty
And even
harsh.
so, I mean, even if I'd never seen him before, um, yeah, that was incredible. He
Yeah,
displays emotions really well. So yeah, I think that might be my favorite scene.
yeah. I was wondering about that Esther relationship. Like, so I assume something has happened in their past, and so we know that Tyler's son passes away in the war in Iraq, and he kind of has guilt about it because he encouraged his son to enlist. But I didn't I didn't like really get what his relationship with Esther was. It almost seemed like he blames whatever they may have had as, or like he thinks that whatever they may have had contributed to God punishing him by taking his son's life. I don't know. Like that's how I kind of read it,
Hmm.
but because he was pretty passionate and like the words that he says to her is very harsh,
He
right? I
says, "I
mean, like I
despise
don't
you."
think you would want to see. Yeah, he says that he despises her like to her face,
So
and
I think they meant after that whole thing, right? Because he was married and his wife left
mhm,
him after their son died. So a little thing on the story is he was in the military. He encouraged his son to enlist. His son died in Iraq. He blamed himself for it. His wife blamed him for it, and she left him. So the relationship with him and Esther, what it seems to be, and the way that the film makes it out to be, is that they had little stints of romance after the fact. This is because he joined the church after all that happened.
yeah, before that he was a chaplain like in the
So she
military.
must have tried to be kind of like a consolation for him, and she seems to be overbearing, and you know, he might have just been he might have kept reminding himself of his son and with that whole thing. So she reminds him of of how much of a failure he is, or at least he perceives himself to be. And so because of that, he despises her, and she won't give up on trying to save him. So he doesn't like people trying to save him, and that's kind of the whole thing.
So is that why cuz he definitely takes something with Mary. Like he likes Mary. He likes spending time with her. Mary is obviously Michael's wife who's pregnant with their baby, and Tyler clearly has. I mean, what does he see in Mary that he wants? You know, like he spends time with her, goes on like that bike ride, which is like one of the other few scenes that has a moving camera. Um,
I didn't think about that one.
and he doesn't want her in the church at the reconsecration
Yeah,
because of what his
he's
plans are.
infatuated with Mary. I mean, a couple of things. She's
Yeah,
young.
but like why her? Like what's different about her versus Esther?
That's a good question. The most obvious one, and this is not the reason, but what the people might see is that obviously she's younger, she's beautiful, and she's naive. She has problems of her own. She doesn't remind him of
Mm,
the fact that he is a failure at some point. So I mean, I think it's a lot of that. When he's with her, those are the only times that we really see him genuinely smile or even laugh,
yeah,
chuckle. Chuckle is the most that he does, and he's not like that with anybody else. She's just genuine. The other chick is Esther is overbearing and much older.
no, that's a good point. Like Esther, I mean, Esther has she doesn't like know what it's like for him, whereas maybe Tyler feels like Mary had like she's going through something really traumatic right now. She just lost her husband Michael, who commits suicide, by the way. That's probably the big spoiler. But so yeah, I think that you're right. That's probably the biggest difference in why he.
Kind of goes into it, I think, but I think that's the main stuff is he doesn't feel despair when he's around her. I mean, he likes her romantically, very clearly before that last scene, we could see it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, she's just sort of she's pure. She's not fake.
Pure, like
Well,
Mother
exactly,
Mary.
right. So that's
Yeah.
you know, I think it's a lot of complicated factors, but I think that's pretty much, you know, that's the sum of it.
You mentioned despair. I mean, so in that conversation that Tyler has with Michael, he mentions how life is like about balancing hope and despair at the same time. And we never see Tyler really have any hope at all. But like that's kind of like his job, right? His job is to instill hope in the community, in
Yeah,
the
that's why I
congregation.
really thought this movie was interesting from that sort of narrative standpoint, I guess, is it speaks on kind of the hip criticism of religious leaders, I believe. So, you know, I mean, that conversation that he has with Michael the whole time, he doesn't believe that stuff. We don't know it at the time, but we
What he's
see it
saying.
afterwards that he doesn't believe any of that stuff. You know, I mean, he says he talks to him about being confronted by blackness. You know, he says courage is a solution to despair. Reason provides no answers. And at the end, it's sort of the ending is sort of arbitrary, but he arguably kills himself and does exactly what
Yeah.
he told Michael not to do. You know.
Yeah, so you could say that if anything, Michael may have had a greater influence on him than he did on Michael
Oh,
with
absolutely,
that conversation.
absolutely, 100%.
I mean, so after that conversation is when like the climate change like topic becomes like a forefront of the movie, and
Preachy.
it's a little preachy, yeah. And again, it's fine to be because it's a real thing to be preachy about, but it takes a strong turn and it kind of becomes in your face because there's like scenes where he's on, I guess, Michael's laptop and he's like watching videos of like what climate change has done to this world. And then we have like your villain with Bulk Industries, and I don't know, like that kind of took me out of it, but I get what it's trying to show, right? And then we have Tyler, who has his sickness throughout the whole movie, and he's kind of ignoring it. And obviously, I guess they were playing on the fact that's like how we treat climate change, where we have the sickness of climate change and we've been ignoring it for so long. And in Tyler's situation, it becomes too late, where he presumably has cancer, and like it's just like the final nail in his coffin, that he just loses all hope and it's only despair. And I mean, yeah, and I guess we can talk about that that magic ride scene, whatever, that with Mary and Tyler. That was a little strange.
Well, let's go back to the environmental stuff for a second, because that's a huge. I mean, that's a huge part, and here's what here's what I think. I don't think that this is the director's intent, but if you really, really, really want to read into it, you know, if you want to reach for some conclusions, this movie does actually a really, really good job of speaking about that whole movement in general. Most of the people who are, I don't know, what so-called environmentalists, I would
Yeah, they
say,
use the word activist, which
and
I kind of
I
don't
might be
like.
wrong. Activists, sure, activists. Most activists in general. Guess where they are? They're in America. They're in the first world. And again, I know that that's a really broad conclusion, but this is kind of my perception of it. And that's where the movie takes place, right? This guy is in America. He's in the first world. He really doesn't know the first thing about climate change. He's just going off of studies and all that stuff. Not that I'm saying this is not happening. Climate change is for sure happening, and I'm not discounting any of the theories. I'm saying that this guy doesn't really know anything about it. It's not really personal to him yet. I would have liked for them to somehow make it more personal, in a way. You know, if this movie took place in an area where they were being affected by climate change, it wouldn't be preachy. The fact that it is an activist who's just going off of, you know, articles. He's going off of anecdotal stuff from other people, not
But he
himself.
does. They
He's
do
not doing
try, I
his
think, with
research.
those photographs that he has of like a few friends of his who are also environmentalists, and he talks about how they've lost their life. You know, whether it was in the Amazon.
Not friends. They're just articles. They're just other people.
Are they? I assumed I read it as like they were people he worked with.
No, because there was one in Brazil and then there was one that was in Ohio, but they're they're not. That's not the impression that I got. It was just these are kind of just news stories that he found, and the fact that it was on his computer, he was researching all of this stuff when Reverend Toller went to his.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the. I mean, I think that that's part of why it is preachy. If they could have, said all of that without saying it, you know what I mean by that? Instead of
Yeah.
directly talking about it, if they had shown it, that would have come off better. It would have come off less preachy. But it actually comes off very preachy. They're not wrong about any of it, but it comes off very preachy because
Yeah,
all
it
they
just
do
kind
is
of takes you out of the movie.
they harp on statistics and they don't
Yeah.
harp on any of the personal effects of it outside. The way that they made it personal is Michael talks about bringing a child into a world where it's not going to be livable because of the climate change. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of far reaching in my opinion in terms of it's not as personal yet. Yeah, that's why I did think it was kind of preachy. However, the fact that he is listening to the stuff about the environmental movement and he wants to take care of meaning Reverend Toller, he changes and he wants to take care of the environment and he can't even take care of himself. That speaks a
Mm-hmm.
lot to, I think that he's kind of representing the movement in that sense, I believe,
No, I see what you're saying. I mean, those are pretty good points, and I mean, again, I agree with you with the whole environmental part being a little preachy, despite it being like totally warranted. Sure, could have been presented in another way though. Do you want to talk about the ending? I guess.
Yeah, we can.
So, actually, when you first mentioned like, oh, this was an interesting movie, I hadn't rewatched it yet, and for whatever reason, I remembered the ending, like being that magic transformation ride, whatever that they take, where they lay on one another, and like, you have this.
Well, it almost
I
is.
don't know. It almost is, yeah, but that's the scene I guess that I remembered more than the actual ending where he puts on the suicide vest and he wants to, I guess, blow himself up at this reconsecration where you have all these people that are coming to his church. But then he doesn't because he sees that Mary is going to be in the church too, and he decides to just kill himself with
So, does he kill himself or does he not?
I'm going to guess. Yeah, see, like it doesn't really matter what you think because it's not meant to be like conclusive in one way or the other. I'm gonna go with no, because obviously everyone in the reconsecration, the church was waiting for him, and I think it's totally reasonable for Mary to go and try to look for him, and she sees him and he stops.
How does she,
Or
how does she
basically,
get into place?
I don't know, man. I mean, just assume she did.
So, yeah, I think if they had not included the scene of Cedric the Entertainer, oh, by the way, we haven't talked about him at all. He's in the movie. He's in the movie and he's good.
Yeah.
If they had not included the scene of him going to look for Reverend Toller and the doors being
Yeah.
locked, then I think it would have been a little bit more arbitrary. However, the doors are locked. She's not getting in. She doesn't have a key.
But she's also been in the house before, so she knows maybe another way to get in and out.
He let her in the front door. So, that's kind of thing. I mean, I think he clearly dies, and I don't think it makes.
Okay.
I think it's another dream sequence. I mean, the way when people do these arbitrary endings, Like, Guillermo del Toro does a really good job with these. You don't know what is real and what is not because he...
Yeah, practically Pan's Labyrinth.
Right, Pan's Labyrinth and even Shape of Water. I mean, we'll talk about that movie hopefully someday. But, he plays with the fantasy aspect the entire movie. The director here doesn't. We only see it once before when they are doing that magical exercise. And that's the only time that he even hints at there being another reality, at there being another possibility outside of the real world, outside of what is rational, and outside of what we are seeing. So I think it's supposed to be where he does drink the Drano, and he does die, but that's the last thing that he imagines, or it's the first thing that he sees when he's resurrected, or whatever the case may be.
I agree with you. I mean, again, like my point was, it doesn't matter which track you go in terms of whether he did die or didn't die. I guess I get your point too, because a lot of times in movies people do this because they want to kind of soften the harshness of death. Right? So, but I mean, it's good to know. I mean, I guess we both have different views on this, which is, I think, really the intention that the director wants.
Yeah,
he wants people to...
he didn't. I mean, I haven't read anything about this movie, so maybe we should before. I don't know if you have or not. I imagine that
raw reaction.
Yeah, I imagine that he just made it arbitrary, and there isn't a right or wrong. And I'm sure that people ask him all the time, does he die or does he not die? And I'm sure he just says, I don't know, what do you think? I think it's so I think that was the purpose, and I think that honestly, I think that's kind of overplayed. So I wasn't really too crazy about it. But I do think that he does kill himself, and it's better ending that way, at least. Rather than it being a miracle that she shows up and
right before he also like drinks the Drano, right? He wraps himself up in the barbed wire. I mean, I guess. Again, more Christian theology being like presented here with Jesus on the cross.
She calls him by his first name in that scene. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it calls him by Ernst. Yeah.
Has anyone called him that?
First. Yeah, I actually looked it up. I actually Googled it because I was like, wait, is Ernst his name? Because I don't think it's mentioned as his name at all before.
Yeah.
That.
So that's also another thing. If his name has not been mentioned once in the entire movie and she says it, then it's clearly him imagining it.
Yeah.
And if that's a detail that the director included, then that's awesome. That's an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else is there to talk about in this movie, man? I think that's most of it. I mean, he does such a good job playing that dark character. Even when he does narrate, his voice falters a little bit at times.
I mean, that's like voice acting on its own, and he does a great job at it.
He does such an amazing job at it. He really does. He speaks in kind of like a somber tone, and that sets the mood really, really well for the entire movie. Yeah, it's a good movie. It's not one of my favorites, I would say. There are some things that I think were, I don't want to say lazy, but just not done the way that I would have liked, which who cares what I like. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good movie, man.
Yeah, I mean, my general consensus is if you like kind of a slow burn but decently well-paced movie with good writing, great acting, then you would probably enjoy this movie. It's also not too long. It's under 2 hours, so it doesn't drag on for like a quote-unquote slow movie.
Right, I think about an hour and 40.
Yeah, so it's not too difficult of a watch despite it being kind of heavy.
I agree, yeah. And it's definitely not, like I said, it's not narrative heavy. If you're looking for a plot twist and you're looking for a lot of stuff to be happening, this is probably not the movie for you.
Yeah,
so.
there's not much happening.
I don't care for that stuff, so it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it's not necessary all the time.
But there's not a lot that happens. You might be confused when you watch it the first time. You might need to watch it a second time. So, yeah.
All right, let's leave it at that then, Faaraan.
Cool. Thanks for having me, dude.
You're a host, man. I don't have you. You host it with me.
Well, thanks for hosting with me, Faraz.
You're welcome. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you haven't already, subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcast, and remember to support us on Patreon or by sharing the podcast with a friend. Feel free to contact us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Twice Over, or email us at comments@thetwiceover.com. All of the music you heard is from Amerigo Gazaway. Check him out on Bandcamp and Spotify.